when we think of the mafia, we do tend to think of the Cosa Nostra, the Sicilian mafia, but they are by no means the only mafia organisation, and they're certainly by no means the biggest, are they?
No, and I think that is a really interesting point to start with, because when I started this investigation, I hadn't heard of the Ndrangheta, despite the fact that they are one of the biggest and richest mafias in the world. This is a criminal organisation which now has its tentacles in at least 50 countries around the world. It's present on every single continent. And essentially, it's got its power now because it got a big share in the global cocaine trade. So it's now estimated by some people that the Ndrangheta runs up to 80% of Europe's cocaine market. And they did that because it's massive, isn't it? And you think, this is a mafia that I've never heard of, one of the biggest mafias in the world that I've never heard of. And then they started sending some of their younger members over to countries in South America to build up links with the cartels, to the point now that one of the main prosecutors who's chasing down the Ndrangheta in Italy told me that there are some Colombian drug cartels that if a huge shipment of cocaine that the Ndrangheta has bought gets seized in Europe, that they'll actually replace it for free. This is how big a deal they are.
Operating, in 50 countries around the world, 80% of Europeans' cocaine trade. Can we put a number on what their likely turnover is? And do we know the scale of this organisation?
So we see a lot of different numbers. One of the ones that the prosecutor told us was around 60 billion euros a year profit, a huge amount of money. But I think what's interesting about them is that they have changed the way they operate. So they have this big stake in the cocaine trade, but they also then push the money from that into other legitimate businesses. So they buy property in parts of Europe. They are involved in other types of organised crime, as you'd expect, say human trafficking, for example. And they wash this money and move it around. And that's why it's so hard to catch them, because you're not sort of just going after a bunch of gangsters blowing stuff up. You're having to unpick businesses around Europe. And that takes a very different type of law enforcement. And that's one of the problems about trying to break up this huge mafia.